Well, here we are on Friday, reflecting back, looking from Dr. Ryan Nielsen's presentation on Wednesday, challenging us to think about the CLB mission in North America. And he helped us focus on insights from the New Testament church in carrying out God's mission. Yesterday, that was furthered as we heard from Dr. Stetzer on what it means for the mission field in North America, the state of the mission field, and where we may be called as leaders and missionary pastors in leading that charge. There were also chances yesterday to reflect on that for ourselves, the implications of that as we go forward. Today, we'll be focusing on resilience in ministry. One study found on pastoral resilience found that most pastors had an average of 8 or more responsibilities. My own study just this fall with leaders and pastors in our church found similar results, at least 8 general responsibilities on a pastor. The same study mentioned above on pastoral responsibilities found that pastors are in danger of burnout because of these responsibilities. And one of the reasons is pastors are viewed as one of the primary resources for the spiritual and emotional health of others. And so the question that we've asked is, well, what about the spiritual and emotional health of pastors and leaders? So today, as we reflect on our mission, on the transformation of the church, we thought it'd be important to focus on this. And so Dr. Mark Sunby is here with us today. And just a little background on Mark here. Mark has served as a consultant, educator, teacher, and counselor in the field of psychology for over 20 years. For the past 16 years, he has been the executive director at LeaderWise, formerly known as North Central Ministry Development Center. He has specialized in personality and leadership assessment with an emphasis on health and wholeness, leadership development, and conflict skills training. The center contracts with over 15 businesses, denominations, and seminaries to provide leadership assessments and meets with about 750 to 1,000 individuals each year. In conjunction with his colleagues at LeaderWise, Mark has developed what is called the Total Clergy Wellbeing, a week-long residential leadership development program for people in ministry that focuses on emotional, physical, and spiritual health. Mark and his colleagues have offered this program in Canada, Scotland, and the United States. As executive director of LeaderWise, Mark regularly presents keynote addresses and workshops on a variety of topics, including conflict management, resiliency, emotional intelligence, and competency modeling to measure and develop effective leaders. Since 1993, he has also served as a visiting professor at St. Olaf College, teaching classes in counseling psychology, health psychology, and the psychology of leadership. In addition to St. Olaf, if he wasn't busy enough already, he has also taught at the graduate level at St. Mary's University and United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities. Mark is an ordained United Methodist pastor in the Wisconsin Conference and a licensed psychologist. He earned his doctorate in counseling psychology from the University of Minnesota, Master's of Divinity from the University of Chicago, and a bachelor's from St. Olaf College. In his personal life, Mark finds time to keep busy with family. He's been married for 30 years, has 2 sons, and pursues interests in bicycling, hiking, exercising, cooking, and spending time with friends. I got the privilege to first know Dr. Sunby years ago, as I had been the visitation pastor at the church where his parents were. Over the years, I've appreciated his care and his insights as a friend and a colleague. We at LBS have appreciated the services of him and his team at LeaderWise in our supervised ministry education program over the last couple of years. Mark and his team provide students and spouses inventories, consultations, and workshops on personality assessment, emotional intelligence, conflict management, and leadership in ministry. Just recently, LeaderWise has also been involved in offering inventories and consultations to our CLB pastoral candidates and missionaries in training. Will you please join me in welcoming Dr. Mark Sunby?
Well, good morning, everybody. It's good to be with you today. So I know you've had a busy week with some fantastic speakers and addressing really important topics. And as Nate mentioned, at LeaderWise, our sole mission is to help people be more effective in ministry, whatever it means for that individual or that organization. And so we meet with between 750 and 1,000 seminarians and clergy per year. And we have a good sense of what's going on in the lives of clergy. So as you think through the mission of your denomination, your church, and as you think about the mission field that's out there and how to reach new people to bring them to Christ, our role is to try and help you stay healthy and balanced so you can be that much more effective. Earlier this week, we were with the Minnesota United Methodists for 3 days talking about resilience in ministry. So it's a topic that a lot of denominations are thinking about across the theological spectrum. And today I'm with you, and I want us to think about resilience in ministry. And that's a phrase we use a lot these days. But if you were to ask somebody in the pew, they'd probably think about it more as stress in ministry. And how does our pastor cope with stress? So I'm going to ask you to do a thought experiment with me. I want you to call to mind a minister who you think manages stress really, really well. I want you to think of one individual and have that person in your mind right now. So I know if I were to ask you somebody who doesn't manage stress well in ministry, you'd probably come immediately to mind several examples, at least I could, because it's a really stressful role. But can you think of an individual who manages stress really well as a minister? You all have somebody? You do? Okay. I'm curious. When you think of that individual, how do you know they manage stress well? What's their attitude? What are their thoughts? What are their behaviors? And I'm curious what you're thinking. What have you noticed about that individual? And you don't need to name them. In fact, please don't. Actually, it'd be a compliment if you did. But I just want to hear what characteristics do they have? What have you noticed? Calm. How do you know they're calm? They look calm. Yeah. We don't know what's going on inside, but they look calm. Good. What if they have time for you? And how do you know they have time for you? Yeah. They're available, they don't seem rushed, and they're fully present with you. At least this is my experience, in the moment. I mean, it's the eye contact. It's like I feel like they're really listening. And there may be a room full of, 100 people, but we're right together, face to face. What else have you noticed? They're fully present with their face, their eyes, they're nonverbal. They're communicating with their whole being that they're with you in that moment. Anything else? That's big, isn't it? A sense of humor. Actually, when we look at a different topic called emotional intelligence, that's one of the hallmark characteristics, is a self-deprecating sense of humor. And it's self-deprecating in a healthy way. You know, they hold themselves lightly. They don't take themselves too seriously. Really refreshing when you're with somebody that way. How about characteristics of a minister you might have observed, maybe once in your lifetime, a minister who seems stressed? Anything comes to mind? Snippy. Now we're getting it. Disorganized. Yeah. Snippy. Rushing everywhere. That's where I go with it. Frenetic, frantic. I've also noticed there's one minister I know that when he's stressed and we're coming out of service, he'll look past me to like the next person or the next thing. He's really not with me in the moment. So part of what this morning is going to be is looking at where we're at as clergy with how we manage stress. We'll be looking at some statistics related to how well clergy manage stress, as well as some of those techniques that will help with resilience. But first of all, I have a quiz for you. We're in a seminary, right? This is in the seminary part of the building. Yeah, we need to have a quiz. Yeah. Some of the students are looking a little nervous, but question number one. During the past 12 months, would you say you have experienced, and write down your answer on a scrap sheet of paper, A, a lot of stress, B, moderate stress, C, little stress, or D, almost no stress? This will come back later in the presentation, so you want to remember how you answered this, what you wrote down. Question number two. How much effect has stress had on your health? A lot, B, some, C, hardly any, or D, none? You have all had a chance to write down your answer to these two. We'll come back to them. So I'm curious, how does stress affect you? Do you ever feel like you're losing your stripes? Well, let's get really personal. How many of you have experienced stress, at least a little, in the last year? Okay, I'm seeing how honest you are. How about in the last 6 months? How about today? Exactly. That's getting to my point. We all experience stress. It's just part of being human. It's the way that we're put together. So it becomes a problem, though, when we start to lose our stride and our composure, and especially in the role of a minister. I don't know if you've experienced this, but I've also served in the local church. And what I know is I'm given a lot less slack as a minister when I'm serving in the local church than just a parishioner. So for instance, if I lose my temper at a council meeting, are they more forgiving or less forgiving than if a parishioner loses their temper? And it only needs to happen once. People will remember it. They might forgive me if I have a good enough relationship. In fact, most people will, but I guarantee you some people will remember. And somebody mentioned snippy or a minister who's under stress. All I need to do is make a snide remark to a parishioner, and it travels throughout the congregation, right? And my credibility is at risk. And that's why losing our stripes as a minister can be problematic. And that's why we want to work on resilience. So I wanted to look at stress, the good and the bad. And some of you may know some of this information already, but it'll give us a baseline and then we'll get personal again. So the first concept is that stress can be good. And it's called eustress, E-U, good, stress. And think about times when stress has helped you out. And I'm thinking back to my days in high school was when I was on the track team. And if I was competing, it was always good to have a little bit of an edge. a stressful edge, to be on edge, I would run faster. And my mind always goes back to this one race where I thought that I was the fastest in the heat. So I didn't feel stress. Guess how I did that race? Not so well, right? It was always good to be a little bit on edge. Undertaking a home project, I may want to move that to distress. But potentially it could be healthy stress if it actually motivated me to finish. Hosting a party, if you come to my house, you'll see us running around the kitchen right before everybody shows up. And that's actually a good thing because it gets us to be motivated to finish the food. And then, of course, giving a presentation. If I didn't take this seriously and feel a little bit of stress as I was preparing, I might not have put as much time into it as I did. So all of those are good. And to translate into ministry, I don't know about you, but sometimes the sermons came really easy and sometimes not so easy. And it certainly depended on the scripture for the week too. If it aligned with my theology, I was right there. If it doesn't align with my theology, I wrestle with it. And I find myself digging more into the text, and I find myself digging more into the background material and talking to colleagues to try and make sense of it. And I'd feel a bit of an edge before I would give the sermon. Like, I don't know how this will go. But that's not necessarily bad because it made me sensitive to what people in the pews were experiencing when they heard the sermon as well. Distress. This is when stress can be bad, potentially. Losing a job. I don't know if you've ever lost a job or have people in your life who have. You'll notice that stress can really take a toll. An otherwise healthy person becomes susceptible to illness. They become even potentially depressed, in my experience. Grieving a death, divorcing, dealing with a chronic illness. All those can be examples of when stress takes a toll. One of the things we'll do this morning is figure out your stress setting. And we'll figure out where you're at with stress today and kind of a baseline. I think of it as a thermostat. And where are you set this morning? A lot of it is contextual. I don't know if you'd agree with this, but when I first started at the center, I was very curious about what makes an effective minister. And because I'm also trained as a psychologist, I dug into the literature. I wanted to see what was the research on that. And one of my favorite studies was a study of ministers where they had peers nominate ministers they thought were particularly effective in the parish. And then they went and interviewed those ministers who had been nominated as effective. And guess what they said? Who said that? Yeah, they didn't. Exactly. What do you think? How come? What do you... Well, you nailed it. They didn't feel it that way. In fact, it said, this is a research article, so typically they're pretty dry, but they said people laughed when they were contacted, like, yeah, sure. And they also said, it may be going well this congregation, but last congregation, I was run out of town, or 2 congregations ago, it was a miserable failure. In other words, it's very contextual. You may be feeling like everything's under control today, but in the next setting, you may really hit a difficult, stressful patch. Or let's make this more positive. If you're under stress today, chances are it'll change tomorrow or in the next season. We're not locked in to a stress setting. When we talk to psychologists, they often talk about fight or flight. The way we're wired, the way that God has created us, is that stress is actually a protective mechanism. Because we become stressed, we will fight or push back. And I get it, as Christians, that may not be the word we would use, at least not in 21st century United States. or North America. But the reality is it's in our ancestry that we would have to fight at times to survive. And then the opposite, or yeah, I guess that would be the opposite, is flight. We would flee to save our skin. The trouble is, it's not really that helpful when you're a minister in a church to either fight or flee. It can get you in trouble, right? And in fact, it can create distress and dis-ease. And I purposely put that slash in there because remember, eustress is good stress. It's not necessarily bad, but when you add DIS in front of it, you know where I'm going. And the same with ease. To be at ease is a good thing. They add the DIS, and all of a sudden, it flips to the opposite. And you know some of these symptoms. I'm sure you've heard this, if not from the media, then perhaps from your physician. There's some statistics that a large number of us as clergy have been told by a healthcare professional that we have to better manage our stress and take care of our health. And I'll be sharing some of those statistics later. The short-term effects, physiological, or fight or flight or distress, is hyperarousal. We're on edge. Have you ever felt that way? When you're under stress, like you're just hyper-vigilant, hyper-aroused. I think of myself as wound up. In fact, that's one of the things I hope you take from today is to be able to identify your internal cues that you're under stress. So think about whether this resonates with you at all. I'm typically a pretty calm person, but I know when I'm under stress because when I arrive at the office, I'm frenetic, right? I'm doing a lot of things at once, and I feel revved up. I feel wound up. And you know what? I think I'm managing it, but other people on staff know it. And so there's this kind of hyper arousal. And how do I know that? They tell me because they're colleagues, but they're also friends. Like, what's going on, Mark? Why are you so wound up today? Increase in blood pressure. Again, we'll be looking at these statistics, but this is an occupational hazard for people in ministry. Our rates of high blood pressure are much higher than the average population. At this conference I was just at with your Methodist colleagues, a number of them freely shared that they were on high blood pressure medicine, and they weren't all that old. It's just part of what it means to be in ministry is because we can't externalize the stress, because we can't push back externally, what do you think happens? We hold it in, we internalize it, and unless we have a way to discharge it somehow, either by talking to good friends, colleagues, mentors, coaches, counselors, it contributes to high blood pressure, among other things. And then, of course, adrenaline. The long-term effects, again, high blood pressure, not only does it increase it in the short term, it results in the actual condition. There are cardiovascular effects, and it contributes to chronic conditions. In fact, when I worked in a chronic pain hospital for a while, stress doesn't cause chronic pain, but it exacerbates it. And it's kind of sensitive when you talk with people who have chronic pain because they don't want to have people think it's all in their heads because it's not. It's real, it's physical. But they also will acknowledge that when they're under stress, it does seem to exacerbate their pain. So stress is good if it keeps us safe. In fact, I'd say it's actually helpful in ministry because I can trust my gut. Do you ever have this when you walk into a room as a minister and you just know something's funny? Like something's brewing. And I've learned to trust my gut as a minister with that. That's stress kicking in like, be careful. But when it becomes chronic and extends too far, that it becomes dangerous. And then there's the psychological consequences. Short-term hypervigilance, excitement, and anxiety. And I want to distinguish excitement and anxiety because they feel the same. As a psychologist, I sometimes have people try to distinguish that. Like before a big event, somebody will say, I'm scared, I'm anxious, but it can also be excitement. Do you ever have that in ministry when it's a big event at your congregation? And is it fear maybe. It's partly excitement, isn't it? Like, how is this going to come out? And I always think of my friend who, I don't know if you've ever been in these puddle jumpers that are, I'm thinking of airplanes. And she was going fishing on a fly-in fishing trip to northern Canada. And she's terrified of flying. So you can imagine putting her on one of these small aircraft. And she went to the doctor and she wanted Xanax, something to calm her down. And the doctor said, is it that you're anxious or is it that you're excited? And it really got her to think about, what is the difference? She ended up taking the Xanax anyway. But it got her to think. It caused her a moment of reflection. And then there's the long-term psychological consequences. There's anxiety. When you're under chronic stress for a long enough period of time, it can actually contribute to a diagnosable condition of anxiety. Substance abuse. I don't know if this is a problem with the Lutheran Brethren. I'd be surprised if there weren't some people who turn to substances to manage stress, but we do see it across denominations in general, and we call it self-medication. So they will drink, they will use substances to try and manage their stress. And, you know, you think of alcohol, but you can also think of sleeping pills as another way if you can't get to sleep. And I know one denominational executive who I was undergoing a significant period of stress at our center. And she said, well, you know, there's this little blue pill that you can take at night, and it knocks me out right away. It's what I did when I was, you know, I forget, she was a conference minister for the UCC. She said, it's what I took when I was a conference minister. Ooh, that'd be a bad precedent for me, you know, because that would become too tempting, perhaps, rather than work through the stress. Exhaustion and depression. So right now we want to measure your vulnerability to stress. So Sarah and I will pass out a brief inventory that you can take. And I hope you have something to write with, because there'll be a couple of little brief self-assessments during this. Sure to add up your total and subtract 20, and you'll come up with a score. And then after I see that people are mostly done, I can share with you the key. And subtract 20. It's a great question. I know where you're coming from. Well, see, this is a stress test. So if you're not stressed by it, it doesn't matter. She might be stressed. Yeah, I know. Actually, sense of humor is huge. We'll be looking at that too. So after you've subtracted 20, you now have a score, and you can compare your score to these results. If you're over 30 for your score, you have a vulnerability to stress. Between 50 to 75 is a serious vulnerability, and over 75, an extreme vulnerability. So I'm curious, are you surprised by your results at all, or is this what you thought? It's what you thought? Oh, who's talking? Oh, there. Say more. What are you thinking? Yeah. So that's actually the most common reaction, especially among clergy, is they experience stress. And the reality is, what we found in our research and also in the literature, is that most clergy feel significant stress. Did you know that 20 to 40% of clergy at any given moment feel severe burnout? So if we took 10 of you, 10 clergy, and put you up here in a row, 2 to 4 of you would say, I'm burnt out, if you were honest. You might not do it in front of colleagues. But if we actually did a survey where it was anonymous, that's typical. So people are experiencing significant stress. So why we use this inventory is this is whether it's going to have a deleterious effect. There's no doubt that it's not fun to be under stress, but is it going to have consequences? And the reason we use this self-assessment here is it identifies what I think of as stress buffers. What protects us against stress? So when you look at this, at the items on this brief self-assessment, are there items that cluster together, that kind of clump together, that you would say, oh, that's a stress buffer. That would protect somebody against stress. I'll have you do the work. What do you see? Yeah. I know. And it's in our genes, isn't it? Being a fellow Norwegian American. It's in our genes. I mean, we got to have it. Other people drink water, we drink coffee. Yeah, I hear you. Yes. So what would you call it?
And some people will listen.
So classic psychological concept, when we have people to talk to, we can externalize our stress in a healthy way. But if we don't, we internalize it. We keep it to ourselves and it will have some sort of effect. In fact, I'm going to share a secret with you. When we do how many of you know the MMPI, Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory? If you don't, you might come across it in our work as psychologists when we work with you as candidates and clergy. When I worked in a hospital setting, I could tell you how chronic pain patients would score. When I worked in a general counseling office, I could tell you how the general population would score. And then I came across candidates for ministry and clergy. Whole different animal. I know, we're unique, right? Because there's one scale on which candidates for ministry and clergy score particularly high that you don't see in the rest of the population or in any other setting I've worked in. And it's scale 3, a tendency to suppress negative emotions and keep them to ourselves. And we're so good at this that other people don't know when we're upset, and we don't know when we're upset. I don't know, have you ever had that as a clergy person where your spouse or a friend will say, Mark, why are you so on edge? What's going on? And I'm not even aware of it, but I'm coming across, and for me, it's my wife. And she'll just be honest with me, like, Mark, what's going on? Like, you really were snapping tonight at the kids. This is when our kids were at home, right? We tend to keep it to ourselves to such a degree that we don't even know the degree of stress we're under. And the other related subskill to that is we don't even know when we're angry. If you ask a clergy person, are you angry? You know what he'll say? Yeah, angrily. What? Me angry? Exactly. They'll often use the word frustrated. I'm frustrated. It's a safer word than anger, which again eats away at us. So I think you nailed it. Social support is what I would call that. Communication and social support. Being able to talk through our feelings. What other stress buffers do you see? Yep. Physiological, taking care of our physical health. It's something that we're called to ministry. We have such a powerful calling that we sometimes neglect the time to take care of our basic physical needs. The danger, of course, is I like to think I'm called across a lifetime, and I want to be serving Christ to the end of my days, and I want to be healthy enough to do that. So it's kind of, I'm shooting myself in the foot, so to speak, if I'm not doing the basic things like eating nutritious food and exercising, because I won't be there for the long haul. What else do you see? Exactly. The people to confide in, people I can be real with, people who know me for me and not a role, right? I'm human. I have this side to me that's not always I'm proud of. And people who can tolerate that in me and hear my doubts, my fears, my anxiety. Yes, back there. No. That's a different presentation, but I will say this. Do you want to hear? I'd love to have a conversation with you because I have speculation. I have a hypothesis. I think it's the kind of person who goes into ministry, partly. But then I also, because we feel committed to helping other people, sacrificing our own needs to meet the needs of others, all of that. And partly I think it's the role. So I once shared that with a bishop in the ELCA, and his response, isn't that what we want in ministers? I know. Well, I would basically agree with whoever said no. But his point is we want people who are really nice. And that's another subscale that loads on scale 3. The other subscale is need to please. And he said, don't we want people like that? It's, yeah, I keep hearing no over here. Exactly. I'd love to have a conversation, discussion around that because I think it'd be really rich. I think it is really it's significant. It would be helpful. Yes.
We have to look in our context that we can confide in. There's also a big place outside.
Yes.
And both ends. So,
yeah. So one of the items is about having a relative living within what, 50 miles? Is that what it says? Most of us don't have that. In fact, I'm with the Presbyterians for a week every summer in Iowa doing something called Synod School. They all gather together. And I run a group for spouses of clergy. And actually, we should talk to the spouses sometime too, because what these spouses often will say is, I married an accountant. I married a lawyer. I married a teacher. I didn't know what I was getting into because now all of a sudden he has a call to ministry. And now I'm living in a place of the country I never thought I'd live. I have no relatives nearby, and I don't have friends. And can you have friends in the congregation? Yeah, it depends how deep you want to go. This is where, I think this is my experience when I was serving in the local church, is I loved these people. I really did. I mean, I was in a great setting. I'm always trying to figure out, did I serve the right churches or, what it was it? But I really loved the people. And I felt a real deep affection for them. And I think most of them, not all of them, felt affection for me. Again, not all of them. That's a whole nother conversation. But were they true friends? If I were having marital problems, would I confide in a parishioner? Maybe, maybe not. Probably not for me. I draw a line there. But even if I had confided in like the head of the administrative council in my tradition, I doubt I would ever share if I were having sexual problems with my wife. I can't even imagine doing that. So with a really good friend, like my best friend outside of the church, might I do that? I might. Would I do that with a parishioner? Probably not. But it's pretty isolating. And that's where I think, Nate, your point is well taken. To have somebody outside of the church system with whom you can confide. It can be a good friend. It can be clergy colleagues. If you're a spouse, it can be other spouses. But to keep that line as clean as possible between the congregation and you. Do I go ice fishing with congregants? Absolutely. I don't know how you'd feel about that, Nate, but I would. I'd go deer hunting, I'd go ice fishing, I'd go bicycling, I'd do lots of different things. I'd be there for them, but it's a confusion of roles if all of a sudden I start confiding really heavy stuff. So that's why I think if you don't have a counselor or a coach or a mentor or good friends with whom you can confide, find them. The other thing I also find in ministry is what happens when a minister confides in a spouse. It makes her stressed out. And this is what I find. So people come to our center across their careers in ministry, and they'll often come after they've had a difficult experience in the congregation, right? We encourage them to come with their spouses. So I have numerous examples in my mind where the minister will be sitting on the couch and his wife will be next to him, and he really got hurt and beat up in the last congregation, but he's already thinking about his next ministry setting, his next call. And what do you think the wife is saying? I'm done. Never again. You could not pay me enough money in the world, and it's not about money, so that's probably not a phrase she would use, but you cannot convince me that this is good for our family. Because he confided in her, and she has no power in the congregation, so that when she runs into so-and-so who is really mean to her husband at the last administrative council meeting, she can't say a word. She just sits there and fumes. And then when it comes time for the next call, where am I going with this? Long story, sorry. It pushed a button, right? Where I'm going with this is to have somebody outside your congregation, if you're a clergy person, with whom you can talk that's not your wife. That's the short of it. Yes, you can confide in your wife. That's a whole nother conversation, how much to confide. But the really hard stuff where she has no power to do anything, and it's just going to make her angry at parishioners, is kind of unfair to her, in my opinion. You may not agree, but that's my experience. Any other stress buffers you see? Yes. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Beautiful. Absolutely critical. There's some research called Flourishing in Ministry that's coming out of Notre Dame. And even though it's a Catholic institution, they're looking at Protestant ministers. And that's one of the key things they say. Once a week, do something for yourself that's just fun, or with your family that's just fun. That's for you and your family. And then have a hobby that you can do at least once a month on top of the just fun stuff. So if you like woodworking, make at least one weekend a month, at least one day a month that you can do your woodworking. Ideally, you do it more often, but at least once a week, take time off, and once a month, do something that's a hobby. It's a real interest for you. I missed it. What was that? A Viking fan is what I'm taking, right? See, I'm a Packer fan, so I'm fine with it. Yeah. Oh, I've lost all credibility. Should I just go home, Nate? That's right. Whoops. Sorry about that. Yes. Yeah. 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 That's a great conversation for all of us at some point, but I'll tell you what I think. I live in a neighborhood in the Twin Cities where they don't know what I do. And I get invited to neighborhood events and they're real with me. And then they figure out I'm a minister and then they become like way too polite, right? I think it's really healthy. But where I also am going with that is siblings. My brothers treat me like their younger brother, Mark, right? There's no presumptions there. There's nothing to do with being a minister. They treat me like me. And I think it's really healthy. And I really value those relationships. They don't cut me any slack. They're just dead on with me and honest. Well, let me share with you some of what I came up with from here for stress buffers. Physical, diet, exercise, sleep. If you come to our center and you're a clergy person or clergy spouse and you're stressed out, we'll talk about your non-negotiables. And that's the phrase I use, non-negotiables. What has to happen every day in your life for you to be healthy? Diet. I know when I'm not eating well. And you know what? I can get away with it for a couple of days, but then I start to feel in a funk by the end of the week. Like when I'm traveling on the road, that can happen. Exercise. Yeah, again, I can get away with not exercising for a couple of days, but I know how I feel when I do exercise. I feel so much better. That's a non-negotiable. And sleep. I forget how valuable sleep is until I haven't had a good night's sleep. And then I can tell you, whoa, I need that. Those would be non-negotiables for many of us. Social support, friends, family members, friends outside of the congregation with whom you can be real and honest, non-Christian friends for you, and maybe for others of us too. Finances, this is something we haven't talked about. Research out of Duke University looking at ministers, the number one stressor, if I'm recalling this correctly, for ministers is finances. The number two stressor for ministers, social isolation. The number one stressor for clergy spouses, social isolation. Those two, social support and finances, are really significant for us in ministry. Time management. In one study, they found that 3/4 of ministers say they don't know how to manage their time. Specifically, they don't know how to prioritize their time because there's so many requests coming at them and so many demands. They don't know what's most important. Is it visiting the person in the hospital? Is it planning the youth event? Is it writing the sermon? And then you have other people making demands on your time for committee meetings. 3/4 of ministers say they struggle with this. Managing their priorities. And spirituality. Huge for people in ministry to manage stress. But number one, according to the research, for people in general, not just clergy, for managing stress, for physical and emotional well-being across a lifetime, is social support. Let me tell you about a study done in Harvard University in 1938. It's called the Grant Study, if you want to look it up, if you ever want to Google it. What they did was they looked at sophomores at Harvard in 1938, and they took physiological measures of health, emotional measures of health. They looked at social support. They looked at demographics. Are they wealthy? Are they from poor families? They looked at educational levels across their lifetime. Some went on for PhDs, some stopped at the BA, all that kind of stuff. And they followed these 1938 sophomores, so what are they, like 19 years old, across a lifespan. And most of them are gone now. There might still be a few left, but most are gone. And what they found was the number one predictor to mental and physical health and emotional health is social support. It's not how much money they made. It wasn't the degrees that they earned. It wasn't anything other than social support. So if there's one thing that you could do today to increase resilience in ministry across your career, it would probably be social support. Here's the thing. Some of you are introverts. And you think, I don't want that many people in my life, right? It's not how many people you have in your life. It's whether you think the people in your life support you, that you have enough people. That's not how many, it's that you have enough. So, for my wife, who's an extrovert, at least that's how I perceive her, she has a huge network of friends. For another person, maybe me, who's more introverted, I have a handful of friends. Do I feel loved and supported by my handful of friends? Absolutely. Do I feel like I have social support? Yes. Does she feel like she has social support? Yes. But if she had only my handful of friends, she might feel socially isolated. That's really your perception of your social support that matters. Sure. Sure.
So I like your relationship face-to-face and over the flashback.
Oh, yeah.
And then the younger generation, they like to get on machines and have relationships over the internet stuff. Is there any difference between that actual spend or I don't know if there's any research on that.
Yeah.
Between real relationships face-to-face and
Yeah, there's actually a lot of research coming out on that because we're fascinated by that. And I think it is baby boomer researchers who have like young adult children. And when they started the research, they were teenagers. So like I noticed like my one son has like 3,000 Facebook friends or something. I think I have like what, 100? You know, and that's like mostly like old high school people who looked me up, right? The research is showing, again, it's the perception of social support. And if you were to ask my son, he might say, oh, I met that person once when I was like on semester abroad in Europe. And I don't really know them, you know, but we became Facebook, you know, stuff like that. So yes, it does. And actually, some of the research shows that social media actually cuts. It can. And we do the social comparison thing. And people aren't posting how sad they are, for the most part. They don't say, I've had a really rough day. I'm really sad. I feel lonely. They're mostly boasting, or yeah, mostly posting and boasting. Hey, look at my new car. Did a great thing Friday night. These are my best friends in the world. I'm the life of the party. Two other quick things about social support. One is, you may know this research, David Spiegel took people who had been diagnosed, women who had been diagnosed with breast cancer, and half of them joined small groups for social support, and the other half just did the typical medical regimen treatment. The half that had been assigned to the small groups, on average, lived 1.5 years longer. And so this is significant stage 4 breast cancer. Another example of how important it is to get things outside of us and communicate them. It doesn't always need to be another person. James Pennebaker did a study where he had college students write down their deepest thoughts, feelings, experiences in the first 3 days of college in a journal. He then had another group of college students just write whatever they wanted with no instructions. Here's a journal, just like journal. The rate of visits to the medical center on campus, to the health center on campus 4 months later, the rate was half as many of the people who wrote down the deepest thoughts and feelings and experiences. They went half as much as the people who just wrote anything. In other words, there's something about getting it outside of us that makes a huge difference. Reason I'm telling you this is ministry can really be socially isolating. That's what you all ministers say in surveys. That's also what we experience. I know I experienced when I was serving in the congregation. It can be really socially isolating. So it's important to find those people outside ourselves who can listen to us and help us process things. And then there's research. So that was about people in general. You all, as clergy and clergy spouses, have something that a lot of the population doesn't have. And there's a number of studies that look at how clergy successfully manage stress. They looked at what they called exemplars in ministry, ministers who are doing extremely well. The number one coping mechanism for stress for ministers who are doing extremely well, spirituality. Number two, social support. So that, it's not mutually exclusive at all, but you do have something through your commitment and your training and your faith that can keep you strong if you keep practicing. Another study looked at almost 1,500 ministers and found that there was a direct correlation between the amount of prayer that pastors engaged in and, I'll see if I can do this from memory, general vitality, physical health, and emotional well-being. There was a direct correlation. The more people engaged in spiritual practices, the more vitality they experienced mentally and physically. So you do have something within our tradition that can keep you really healthy, along with social support. I really want to keep emphasizing that, because in some of the research on ministers, they say it's a little bit risky, because if you do what's called interpersonal work, so intra meaning internal work, the danger is you might not turn to other people, and you want both. The exemplar pastors did both. They had both the internal work and they had a social network. Those are the people who thrive the best. Wanted to share this with you. There's some interesting research that's coming out that it's not the amount of stress you're under, it's how you perceive that stress and how you respond to it that matters. Specifically, this comes from the work of Arnold Lazarus, a psychologist who looks at how we respond to stress. Primary appraisal, when you're under stress and you're in a stressful event in particular, do you see it as a threat? Or do you see it as a harm, like the damage has already been done? Do you see it as a threat, like, oh no, this can only turn out badly? Or do you see it as a challenge and an opportunity? Once you perceive it, how do you respond to it? That's a secondary appraisal. The self-appraisal, do I have the resources to cope? And then finally, actually engaging in those coping efforts. I always think of this when I think about teaching at St. Olaf College, because I oftentimes teach intro psychology where I have over 100 students in a lecture hall. And I think about, and this happens every semester, where a student will oversleep and miss an exam. And these are mostly first-year students, right? This is their first college class. And some of them, this is how I speculate, will just think, oh, I missed the exam. There's nothing I can do, and just roll over, fall back to sleep. Others will think, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing ever. I've missed an exam. I'll get these frantic emails, right? And I'll check my voicemail and I'll be frantic. That's the threat. And then I had one student once who said to me after sleeping through an exam, Dr. Sunby, I never thought I'd have a chance to have a one-on-one conversation with you. I thought, that's good. That's a great reframe. That's the opportunity, right? So where I'm going with this is, if we can reframe our situations to see them as challenges and opportunities, that's a way we can handle stress in ministry. Give you an example. This is really fresh. Just found out yesterday that a colleague can't lead a retreat. She said she would lead it this weekend. She has a health crisis in her family. So she calls up me, the executive director, and says, Mark, what do we do? I look at the schedule, everybody's busy, except, and it's in strategic planning, which is not my gift. It's not how I'm wired. I'm a psychologist, I'm empathy, right? So for better or worse, that's what they're getting on Saturday. And I said this to my wife, and her response was, well, what a great opportunity for you to learn strategic planning. It went from harm, threat. I'm trying to work on the opportunity here, the challenge, right? But you can think of numerous examples in ministry where we're thrown as generalists. Hasn't that happened to you? You're thrown into new situations for which you were never trained in seminary, which you've never imagined you'd even be doing, but you're asked by a community member or congregational member to do something, and it's really important to them. And you feel like you could probably do an okay job, but it takes a risk to make that bridge. That's going from harm, threat to challenge and opportunity. I think we have time for this. So if you want to start passing out the hardiness scale, Sarah, and whoever wants to help her, I'll explain the concept. This comes from research by Sandra Cabasa, and she breaks hardiness into 3 dimensions. Dimension number 1 is control versus powerlessness. Do we feel like we have control in situations, or do we feel powerless? So I want you to think specifically about your ministry. Do you ever feel like there's times when you feel powerless? Or do you feel like you have control? Commitment versus alienation. This gets right to the sense of call. Do I feel committed to my work, or do I feel alienated from it? And I think for ministers, it's not only about commitment to ministry or a call to ministry, it's about a call to a particular ministry setting or congregation. Do I still feel called to serve in this community? And then finally, challenge versus threat. Do I perceive events as a challenge, or do I feel them as a threat? I'm passing out a hardiness scale. And I'll give you a moment to do this, and then I'll share with you the score. There we go. So these 3 dimensions came from Sandra Cabasa's work at the University of Chicago. What she did was she tracked 200 employees at a utility company in Chicago, and she tracked them for 5 years. And she wanted to see physical health and emotional health and see how they fared. And she used this scale, the hardiness scale. And what she found was that regardless of how they scored on the hardiness scale, people experienced similar life events. They experienced death and grief. They experienced divorces. They experienced financial setbacks. They experienced all the vicissitudes of life, right? But she found that people who scored higher on the hardiness scale for control, commitment, and challenge fared better with physical and emotional health than those who scored lower and experienced powerlessness or alienation from their work or saw the world as threatening. And now I'll tell you how to score it. You didn't know there'd be algebra today, did you? Yeah, now you're stressed. So all you do is for control, for the subscale and control, you add the numbers, you put the rating you put for items 1 and 7. So you take the sum of items 1 and 7, and you subtract the sum for the items 2 and 8. And then you take out your trigonometry rulers. No, so look at item 1, see what you put as a number, and you add that to the number you put for item 7. And then you subtract the sum for items 2 and 8. And then you do something similar for commitment and challenge. And we'll take a break in about 2 minutes, but if you can bear with me, I'm going to walk you through the scoring, and then we can come back after the break. You also add up your total score. You do that as well. It's a challenge. It's not a threat. It's a challenge. You all have your scores? Because I'm going to change the slide. Or should I keep you in suspense till after the break? Yeah, let's not do that. Okay. This is the rating according to Sandra Cabasa. If you scored between 10 and 18, you're scoring with a hardy personality type. Between 0 and 9, you have moderate level of hardiness, and it is possible to score below 0, and that would be a low score for hardiness. In other words, control, commitment, challenge. If you have those elements in your life right now, and I'm thinking particularly in ministry, if you see that you have some influence in your ministry setting, you feel called to your setting still, and you see it as an opportunity rather than a threat, you're going to score higher for hardiness. You're going to have better physical and emotional well-being on average. If you don't, you can do something. I want you to think about over break, only if you want to, you might just want a real break, what you could do to increase the sense of control in your ministry, the sense of commitment, or the sense of challenge. And there are ways to do that. It's not like you're born with this score and this is it forever. I actually think it's very much by season and setting.